Today we are going to make Korean White Kimchi. Apart from the well-known spicy red kimchi, fermented white kimchi is a traditional Korean kimchi that is not spicy. I have fallen in love with white kimchi, and if you enjoy fermented foods, hopefully you will fall in love with it too. There's no red pepper added to this white kimchi, so it's not spicy, nor is the taste overpowering. It's a light and refreshing kimchi, while still it maintains that tangy and garlicky flavor that kimchi is known for. Not to mention, it's also incredibly healthy for the gut microbiome because it's fermented and it's nutritious for the body and mind. There are two styles of kimchi. Mock kimchi is the sliced cabbage version, which is also called quick or instant kimchi. The other style is called Ttong kimchi, which is the whole cabbage version. Today I'm showing you a mock kimchi recipe using sliced cabbage. In an upcoming video, I'll be sharing a Ttong white kimchi recipe. That one is a little more intermediate in my opinion, so if this is your first go at kimchi, today's mock kimchi is a great place to start, and it will build your kimchi confidence. The ingredients needed for this recipe are 1 head of Napa cabbage, daikon radish, carrot, green onions, red bell pepper, shiitake mushrooms, pear, ginger, onion, garlic cloves, fish sauce, which can be omitted if you want a vegan version or if you have any type of fish allergy. Salt and water are the remaining ingredients. Don't worry about writing all of that down. I've got a link for a printer-friendly ingredient and measurement list in the description. The ingredient measurement quantities for this recipe are based on a 4-pound Napa cabbage and will make approximately 4-quart jars or 1 gallon. If you have a 2-pound cabbage or a 6-pound cabbage, you will need to adjust the measurements accordingly. Weigh the cabbage either at the grocery store with their produce scale or at home if you have a kitchen scale. Step 1. The cabbage. For kimchi making, use Napa cabbage and not regular head cabbage. The first thing you want to do is to inspect it. Look for any leaves that are bruised, damaged, wilted, or yellowing, and just simply remove them. My cabbage here is in good condition and it's quite fresh, so I will only need to remove this one leaf. No need to wash the cabbage beforehand. Please see the facts section at the end of this video, where I'll discuss the topic further. Especially watch that section if you have concerns about not pre-washing and bad bacteria. Next, quarter the cabbage into 4 wedges. Place the knife anywhere from the 3/4 to halfway length on the cabbage, then cut through. Then stick your thumbs in the end like so and gently pull the cabbage apart. Repeat with each half of the cabbage to make 4 wedges total. Again, cut through at around the 3/4 to halfway mark. Stick your thumbs in the end and pull apart. With mock kimchi, the stem base of the cabbage is removed. Cut it off from all 4 wedges. Now slice the wedges into approximately 1-inch sections and place into a large bowl. Do this with all 4 wedges. Give the cabbage slices a quick shot of water and toss. No need to drain. This shot of water is actually not for washing purposes, but so the salt will stick to the cabbage for the brining process. For a 4-pound cabbage like this one, you'll need about 1/2 cup of medium coarse salt. See the facts section where I discuss further details on which salt is best and which type of salt to avoid. We're going to add the salt in segments, so sprinkle some over the top, then toss and mix in. Go a little deeper into the cabbage and add some more salt. Toss to mix. Try to bring some of that cabbage up from the bottom. Repeat this process until the salt is all used up. Once the salt is incorporated throughout the cabbage, place it aside and set a timer for about 4 hours. Over the 4 hours, the salt is going to pull the juice out of the cabbage and it will become wilted looking. This is the traditional Korean method of preparing Napa cabbage for kimchi. While the cabbage and the salt do their thing, we'll move on to step 2. After that, the time is yours to get some work or errands done until the remaining 4 hours is complete. Step 2, prepare the vegetables. Remember, I have a printer-friendly document for all the following ingredients in the description. This is a daikon radish. See the facts section for suitable substitutions. Peel it and then cut it into 2 to 3 inch chunks. Matchstick or julienne the radish. Personally, I found that I like it even further cut in half because I like the bite size when eating the finished kimchi. Follow your own personal preference. Add it to a large mixing bowl. Next, do the same thing for the carrot. Peel and cut, add to the mixing bowl. Next up are green onions. First, peel off any browning or wilting layers. Then inspect each onion for limp greens. Any greens that fall down like this, remove it since it's not fresh and crisp. Cut off the roots, then about 1 inch or 2 of the top ends. Slice into 1 inch pieces, add to the mixing bowl. Now we'll prep our red bell pepper for slicing by removing its heart and the seeds. Slice and give them a rough chop. Add to the mixing bowl. Lastly, let's prep our mushrooms by removing the not so great spots first, and feel free to see the facts section for suitable substitutions. Then slice the mushrooms up. For mushrooms, I don't further halve them because they kind of shrink up to a nice bite size during the fermentation. Add to the mixing bowl. Next, we'll be adding fish sauce. If you're a vegan or have fish allergies, no worries, just simply omit it. But if you don't have an issue with fish products, it adds wonderful flavor, and surprisingly, it's not fishy, despite how it smells. Fish sauce is sold at just about every standard grocery store in the Asian food section near the teriyaki sauces. Mix up the veggies. We want the fish sauce to be a light coating on everything. Then add about 2½ teaspoons of salt over top. Add and mix intermittently to get the salt evenly worked through. That salt that we just sprinkled over top is going to work on the vegetables and draw out the vegetable juice. It's going to add such a wonderful flavor. We're just going to set these vegetables aside, let them do their thing with the salt, and we're going to check on our cabbage. It's been about 2 hours, and let's take a look. It's doing really well. It's supposed to be getting nice and limp like this. Do this test to see if the cabbage is ready. Pick out a stem piece, then fold it in half, and if it snaps, the cabbage is not ready. Let's fast forward now to 4 hours and see how it's doing. I'll select another stem piece and give it the bend test. It still has some firmness, yet at the same time it's pliable and bendy without breaking. This cabbage is ready. Pour the cabbage into a large colander and rinse really well with water to flush out all the remaining salt. Rinse very thoroughly. Next, we need to allow the cabbage to strain and drain until no more water drips out the bottom of the colander. This can be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Meanwhile, we can go on to the next step. Step 3, preparing the broth. We're going to take 4 cups of warm to room temperature water and add the amount of salt needed. It's going to vary depending on whether or not you've chosen to add fish sauce. Since the recipe I'm demonstrating does have the fish sauce added, this is 18 grams of kosher salt. Give it a mix to fully dissolve the salt, and the warm temperature of the water will also help the dissolving. Set it aside, we're going to use it later. These are 2 good-sized pears, ripe and soft. See the facts section for best types of pears and substitutions. Peel, quarter, and remove the cores. Toss it into a blender or food processor. Next, add the garlic. Cut off the hard end, and then I found giving it a whack with a broad knife to be one of the best ways to have the skins slip right off. Add to the blender. Next, we'll add about a finger length of ginger. Peel it, chunk it up, and add it to the blender. Next, 2 medium-sized onions. Get the blender or food processor ready to go, and just before turning it on, add 1 cup of plain unsalted water. Blend until it runs smooth and silky like this. Now we're going to strain it 3 times. This is the first strain. Pour it in. Then stir with a spatula or spoon. Work the liquid through. This will take a couple of minutes, so have patience. Keep going until what remains is like an applesauce texture, and when you pull the spatula through it, it holds its shape. Give the strainer a rinse to clear it out, and yep, our cabbage is still slow straining in the sink. With the second strain, we're going to pour the salt water through as well. Rinse to clear out the strainer once more. Now for the third and final strain. It should run through clear with minimal residue. Step 4, bringing it all together. Place the cabbage into a large mixing bowl. Now add the brining vegetables to the mixing bowl, including all of its juices. Scoop only a few cups of the broth over the mixture. Then give it a stir to combine everything. Step 5, loading the jars. With a scooper, place the vegetable mixture with its added broth to the jar. We want a loose pack, not a tight pack like with classic sauerkraut. You want to be gentle with the kimchi vegetables. Leave about a 2 to 3 inch headspace, and then you can give a very light pressing at the top. Next, we'll finish the jars off by adding the remaining broth. This is an extra light touch tamper to ensure all the vegetables are submerged beneath the kimchi broth. Do not crush down or pack tightly. Top off as needed. Yes, there will be some floater vegetables, but it's okay. If you use jars like this, you will have broth left over. Don't throw it out. Add it to soup broths or other cooking dishes. It has wonderful flavor. If you instead use a gallon jar, then you'll be able to pour off all the remaining broth into the jar without any leftovers. With either size jar, place a loose lid on top. Traditional kimchi making instructions are to leave it on the countertop for 24 to 48 hours. In some Korean household traditions, they will eat the kimchi the first 3 to 5 days, also known as the sparkling period when the fermentation is really bubbly. While other Korean household recipe traditions will place it in the refrigerator after the 24 to 48 hours of countertop fermenting, and then allow it to continue slowly fermenting for 3 weeks in the refrigerator before eating. However, my kimchi kept developing a serious problem following those traditional instructions. I kept losing my batches to spoilage. The kimchi would be amazing for 4 days, but then by day 5 or 6, it would turn over spoiled. I've got more on that in just a moment, including how to prevent it. First, just let me say, if you popped in to learn how to make white kimchi with step-by-step instructions, thank you for watching and I hope you enjoy the recipe. If you are interested in learning how to make whole Ttong kimchi, I've got a video on that as well. See the description below for the link. As for the diehards, continue watching and I'll share with you how I solved the spoilage problem I was experiencing. Plus, the facts section is coming up, and that has a lot more information to answer questions you may have, and it will help set you up for white kimchi success. Okay, let's talk about countertop fermentation time. This is where I veer off the path from the traditional Korean method. Allow me to explain. As I mentioned, the traditional method is to leave it on the counter for 24 to 48 hours before moving to the refrigerator. But my kimchi kept spoiling batch after batch doing this. To troubleshoot the issue when outside help was not responsive, I got out my handy dandy pH meter. I'm an adamant user of pH meters because I think they are one of the best tools to track the progression of a fermentation. I was going to use it to figure out what was going wrong. So I would take the starting pH, which is typically around 6-ish. That's totally normal. And within 24 to 48 hours, now when you're supposed to move it to the refrigerator, the pH was not yet below 4.5. It was instead around 4.9. If you've watched my other recipe videos like Fermented Pickles and Red Sauerkraut or my Fermentation Funk series, I talk about the necessity of a pH needing to be below 4.5 in order for the fermentation to be successful and safe to eat. In other words, not go bad. If the pH is still above 4.5, that means that bad bacteria can still proliferate and result in spoiled food, which is exactly what I was experiencing with my kimchi. Once I moved the kimchi to the fridge, I continued testing the pH, and it was no longer continuing to drop. It was holding at the same pH as when I placed it in the fridge. Refrigeration slows a fermentation down greatly. Not quite halted, but just about. Therefore, those cold temps weren't allowing for the fermentation to progress far enough in order for the pH to drop below 4.5. A dropping pH is the sign of a healthy and active fermentation. The only time I got the kimchi not to spoil after only 48 hours on the counter before moving it to the refrigerator was when I followed a recipe that had a broth salt brine concentration of 8%. That extreme high salt content was able to kill off the bad bacteria in compensation of a pH that was above 4.5. Needless to say, though, it was so salty that it wasn't palatable. So continuing with extremely high salt content wasn't going to work. So this is what I did to fix it. I took my sauerkraut fermentation knowledge and applied it to this white kimchi. I stopped placing the kimchi in the refrigerator after only 24 hours. Instead, I kept it on the counter until the pH was below 4.5. This took about 6 to 7 days. Then I placed it in the fridge for long-term storage. I haven't experienced spoiled kimchi since. Problem solved. In the facts section, I'm going to do a deeper dive into kimchi pH and how it can prevent spoilage, as well as showing you exactly its day-by-day pH progression into the safety zone for those of you who are the ultra diehards like me. First, here's the table of contents for the facts section, along with timestamps so that you can just jump right to the section you want to watch. I've also placed timestamp chapters in the video description, so you can come back later and go right to the section you want to view without having to search through the whole video. Continuation of the pH discussion. I'm going to jump right in from where I left off with this discussion. I've gone through this process with several kimchi batches, and they were all consistent in pH results. I'll share with you the pH journey of the specific batch I made here in this video in the gallon jar. At 24 hours, day 1, the pH was 5.7. Day 2, 4.97. Day 3, 4.90. Day 4, 4.66. Day 5, 4.40. Day 6, 4.23. Day 7, 4.22. Day 8, 4.14. Day 9, 4.12. And day 10, 4.10. Now, I didn't experience spoilage by day 5 like I had with my initial white kimchi batches, because look at the numbers. By day 5, it had slipped just under 4.5, the safety zone. If you opt to do the same method once the pH drops to 4.3 or 4.2 on day 6 or 7, which I think is more decently into the pH safety zone, then place your kimchi in the refrigerator. Keep in mind, environmental temperatures affect fermentation speed. If you're fermenting in temperatures above 80 degrees, the pH safety zone may occur sooner. If you're fermenting under 70 degrees, the fermentation speed may be too slow and the batch goes bad because the pH safety zone didn't happen soon enough. My kimchis were fermenting in an environment of 72 to 74 degrees. With this gallon jar batch, I did leave it on my counter longer than the others for the sake of observing the pH for my own educational purposes. You do not have to do that. You can put it in the fridge just right when the pH drops into that safety zone. I also want to add this commentary. In my opinion, a pH meter is an awesome tool to track the health and progression of your fermentation. Is it mandatory? No, of course not. But for me, I became a better fermenter when I started using a pH meter because I could see, study, and troubleshoot much better. Just like I did with my white kimchi spoiling problem. I was able to troubleshoot with a pH meter because I understood the relevance of pH in fermentation. I applied my knowledge and solved the problem. You can do the same. Washing the vegetables. The yeast and bacteria needed for a successful fermentation are naturally present on the vegetable. If the vegetable is washed with a produce wash, those essential good bacteria are washed away and down the drain, which can significantly increase the risk of a failed fermentation, even more so if the vegetable is store-bought. I have found in my own fermentation experience that vine vegetables are the most susceptible to washing and baking soda soaks because their skin is thin and smooth. Aside from home washing, produce is heavily washed in the United States before it hits the grocery shelf. This includes organic produce. For example, I've had 100% fail rate with store-bought cucumbers when attempting to make fermented pickles. I never have a problem with my own garden or farmer's market cukes. And as a note, I have found that cabbage and root vegetables are much more able to take washing better than vine vegetables. But if you experience a fermentation fail, keep vegetable in mind when you're doing your troubleshooting. To sum it up, if there's dirt present, rinse it off. Don't soap wash it off, and if it's not dirty, I typically don't even rinse it. If you have concerns about pesticides, buy organic or farmer's market when it's available. If you have concerns about bad bacteria on the vegetables before fermenting it, have no worries. The fermentation process actually kills off bad bacteria. First, by a salt concentration of 2% or higher, which all proper fermentation recipes account for this, including this one. And salt brine below 5% won't kill off all the bad bacteria by itself, but in a nutshell, here's how it works. Lactobacillus, our good and needed bacteria for fermentation, are salt tolerant. Bad bacteria are not. So as bad bacteria are weakened in the salt brine, the lactobacillus are thriving. They proliferate, and two things happen when they do. One, they excrete lactic acid. This acid secretion is what causes the pH to drop. The lactobacillus survive just fine in their self-produced acid environment, while the bad bacteria die off due to not being acid tolerant. Second, nature's survival of the fittest takes place. The lactobacillus population increases and strengthens, while the bad bacteria population decreases and weakens. Hence, nature does what it does, and the lactobacillus go for dominance. They kill off the bad bacteria, which are already weakened by the salt and acid. So we have a symphony of natural processes happening here, and the end result is bye-bye bad bacteria. That's why fermentation used for long-term food storage can happen without the food spoiling. Of course, when it's done correctly. Salt. The best salt to use for Korean kimchi is Korean coarse sea salt. Although it's the best, it's not the only. Kosher salt has a nice medium coarseness to it and can be used instead of Korean sea salt. Kosher salt is what I used in today's video. Coarse Celtic sea salt is also okay to use. A note about all and any salt you're thinking of using, including kosher. Read the label to ensure it says only salt. Any added anti-caking or preservative ingredients can cause a fermentation fail. Here's an example. Look at the ingredients of these two kosher salts at the store. One reads only salt and the other has things added. Buy the one that has no extra ingredients. Here's a list of common salt additives. However, the bottom line is this. Don't use any salt with an ingredient addition, even if you don't see it listed here. Can you use fine-grained salt like Himalayan or fine sea salt? Yes, but in that case, you must weigh out the salt measurement in grams. For example, a volume measurement of 1 tablespoon of coarse salt and 1 tablespoon of fine salt have different weights due to grain size. This will affect the salt concentration. Will this variation fail the ferment? No. Could it make the difference between just the right amount of salt and too salty? Yes. I typically don't fuss about 1 to 3 grams difference in salt weight with my fermentations. Hence, I don't say anything about whether fine or coarse salt should be used at the same volume. But I have found kimchi to be extra sensitive by quickly and easily becoming too salty for enjoyable eating. That's why I'm mentioning it here when normally I give a free pass with other types of fermentation. Substitutions. Mu radish is a Korean radish and preferred with kimchi, but unless you live near a mu radish farm or a big city with a Korean market, it's not as commonly sold at regular grocery stores like daikon radishes. I honestly don't think there's a single mu radish in the entire state of Montana where I live. Trust me, I looked. If it's your first time buying daikon and you can't seem to find it anywhere in the produce section, track down a produce employee and ask them to show you where it is. Oftentimes it's kind of hidden or cut up into segments and wrapped in cellophane, which it can make it kind of hard to see when your mind is looking for something else. If both daikon and mu radish are not available to you, use regular red radish. You'll just need more of them since they're small. When it comes to mushrooms, you can use any type. I use shiitake, but standard white or brown also work. Other mushroom options are oyster, stone ear, or even dried. If you opt to use dried, rehydrate it first, then slice and add to the kimchi mixing bowl. A nice ripe Korean or Asian pear is first pick, but since neither were available to me, I used a juicy ripe Bartlett. You can really use any kind of pear, the sweeter the better. And always juicy ripe, never hard and dry. And if pears are totally out of your reach, you can substitute with apple. When it comes to salt, I used kosher salt in today's video because it was the right coarseness and easily accessible to me in my rural setting, whereas Korean sea salt was not. From there, any type of natural salt will work. However, see the salt segment of the facts section because I go into greater detail of what type of salt to avoid, including a certain type of kosher salt. When to eat. As I mentioned earlier in the video, traditional kimchi making instructions are to leave it on the countertop for 24 to 48 hours. In some Korean household traditions, they'll eat the kimchi during the first 3 to 5 days, also known as the sparkling period, when the fermentation is really bubbly and it kind of sparkles on your tongue. While other Korean household recipe traditions will place it in the refrigerator after 24 to 48 hours of countertop time and then allow it to slowly ferment for an additional 20 days in the refrigerator before eating it. The kimchi will have a lighter flavor and texture in the first 2 to 4 days. The kimchi will develop more sour tanginess as it ages, so when should you eat it? Sooner or later? The answer is to eat it when it tastes best to you. Experiment by taste testing after 48 hours. Personally, I love the flavor and bubbles of the sparkling period. However, there's typically too much for me to eat entirely within a few days, so I go along with its developing flavors and enjoy the taste and texture of every stage. Truthfully, I never wait out the entire 3 weeks before diving in. You don't have to either, just follow your palate. The phases of fermentation. Fermentation is not static, it's dynamic and ever-evolving. That's because the microbes responsible for the fermentation are alive and going through successive stages. By the second day of your kimchi, you'll notice bubbles forming and the brine expanding. So you may want to place a towel or a dish under the jar. This is due to phase 1 of fermentation, where the yeasts and the Leucaena stalk bacteria are thriving and most active. From there, the bubbles will slowly begin to dissipate each day until there are none due to the yeast and the Leucaena stalk bacteria dying off. The brine level will also come down. In stage 2 of fermentation, lactobacillus, the bacteria commonly referred to as probiotics, begin dominating the fermentation process. It's usually by day 8 that this full lactobacillus domination is taken over, but it can be a little sooner or a little later. Of course, environmental temperature can make a big difference. Also, by time that this lactobacillus domination has taken place, all the bubbles are completely gone. Kimchi tips. With kimchi, we don't pack it down like what's done with classic sauerkraut. And with the traditional Korean method, it doesn't stay out on the counter for more than 2 days. But what if you've decided to leave it out on the counter for longer, as I did? In that case, the kimchi needs to be tended to twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. Even if the pH is dropping or even in the safety zone, the most susceptible part of the kimchi is the surface area, where oxygen meets the veggie floaters. With a clean utensil, press down the surface area to make sure the surface veggies are dunked, bathed, or coated with the brine. Brine is the protector, so as long as the dunking takes place daily, no surface funk should develop. If daily dunking can't be relied upon, then you can opt to add a weight as to keep things submerged beneath the brine. But don't press and pack it down. Be gentle with the kimchi. The Kimchi Secret. I'm about to tell you something no other kimchi recipe video will, and I share this in good humor, so please receive it lightheartedly. If you're a seasoned kimchi maker, then you already know this. But if you're new to kimchi making, someone should give you a fair warning. Kimchi, white and red, I would say have a very strong and unique smell to it. However, as my husband would say, it reeks. And its smell does not dissipate with time, it actually gets stronger. Yes, my friends, kimchi tastes so good and it's so healthy, but it smells so... well, you'll soon discover what I'm speaking of. Enjoy! So do you feel like your head's gonna explode with all this information? I know, it was a lot, but I want you to be successful, and with that, knowledge and information is needed. Check out all my fermentation videos right here in this playlist, both recipes and education. For Ttong whole kimchi, click right here, and all the links can be found in the description. Bless you, my friends. Enjoy this Korean white kimchi recipe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.